Singularity.
My name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and you're watching Singularity One-on-One. If you guys enjoy this show, please help me make it better by going to iTunes and writing a brief review for the show, or simply going to our donations page and donating any funds that will be used to make it even better than this. Today, my guest on the show is Daniel H. Wilson. Daniel is the author of a number of very interesting books. Actually, I reviewed one of them about a year ago on singularityweblog.com. It's called Robopocalypse, and it was picked up by DreamWorks, and Steven Spielberg is due to release a movie, as far as I know, somewhere in 2013. So, without further ado, welcome Daniel, and thank you for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, Daniel, I know that from your biography, you are actually a Ph.D. in robotics, as well as being an author. So let me start our conversation by asking you this. Which Daniel was first, the author or the scientist?
I grew up like a lot of scientists and like every author. I grew up reading science fiction as a kid. And, I really wanted to write science fiction when I was younger, but it's really hard to break in. And so ultimately I ended up going to school and studying computer science and then studying robotics. And for me, the science was kind of the next best thing to the science fiction. And in retrospect, I'm really glad that I did. I love robots either way. If I wasn't writing about them, I'd be building them. And so I'm just happy I get to be involved in some way.
That's fantastic. So let me see. I've been reading some of you. I've already read How to Survive a Robot Uprising. I read Robopocalypse. I read the first chapter of your latest book called Amped. But let me see if I can try and give you a little bit of hard time here in good spirit.
Okay. Yeah,
so if I get it right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole idea of How to Survive a Robot Uprising is to, in a way, make fun of Hollywood.
Yes.
And movies such as, say, The Terminator, The Matrix, etc. Right? So your book is, I find, as funny as it is well written and interesting and actually accurate, but it is at the same time hilarious. I just love it. So that's totally fine and good. But then you follow up that book with another book which does exactly the opposite, Robopocalypse, right?
Yeah.
Which takes the broadly speaking, the Terminator scenario, and to top it off, it becomes a major Hollywood movie.
Yeah, well, first of all, there were about 5 or 6 other books in between How to Survive a Robot Uprising. So I also wrote Where's My Jetpack, How to Build a Robot Army, The Mad Scientist Hall of Fame, Brojitsu, the martial arts sibling rivalry, and then A Boy and His Bot, which is a middle reader about robots in which the robots are decidedly not evil. But yeah, in a lot of ways with Robopocalypse, I feel like maybe I kind of slipped over toward the dark side and became what I was making fun of in How to Survive a Robot Uprising. But, Robot Uprising, a lot of it makes fun of, for instance, the time travel in Terminator, or some of the goofier stuff, and in Robopocalypse, that is, in my perspective, just as realistic of a robot uprising scenario that you could come up with. Now, admittedly, the robot uprising scenario is not likely to happen, and it's a little bit ludicrous just by itself. But if you were going to write a robot uprising scenario, I don't know how it would get more realistic than what I wrote. So, for that part, at least I stuck to my roots there and tried to create as few things to make fun of about Robopocalypse as possible. Once you swallow that big pill that it is a robot uprising.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it's dramatic. It's much more interesting and exciting.
Creepy.
Yeah, and creepy to write about this adversarial relationship that we have with our technology than it is to write about, some sort of utopian future where there's no drama and where we just love our technology.
Okay, so you
That's
you
that.
you didn't have to go through this kind of a internal struggle for being so inconsistent about first poking fun of the whole thing and then becoming part of it.
I'm not getting paid to be consistent. I'm getting paid to write, awesome books, and Robopocalypse is what was in my mind, and so, that's what I wanted to explore.
Okay, fantastic. So let us spend a little time then talking about each of your books, culminating with your latest one. So perhaps we should start with Where's My Jetpack?
Sure.
It's a book that I haven't read, but I've sort of browsed through quickly, and I've watched a couple of your interviews and your Google authors at Google presentation about it. And it is a book where you do not lament, but sort of demand with that question, where's my jetpack?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, that whole book is really about, where's this future that we're supposed to have?
So for example, what do you feel when other well-known science fiction writers, such as, for example, Neil Stevenson, the author of Snow Crash, supported by Peter Thiel, come up and claim that we actually haven't made almost any noticeable progress for the last 40 or 50 years since the lunar landings?
I uh, I hadn't heard that. I mean, I heartily disagree with that. I mean, the whole point of Where's My Jetpack is not to be negative. It's not to say, there are other books where people claim, oh, the scientists have let us down. We don't have all this stuff. But the fact is, all that stuff we wanted, X-ray specs, jetpacks, flying cars, underwater cities, all of that stuff, in various formats, we got it. And to the extent that it was useful, it became a part of our lives. And as a result, it became very mundane to the point that you don't even notice it. I mean, people, as soon as they get the new technology, it goes right into the background of our lives, and we immediately take it for granted. And that's kind of terrible because we live in a wondrous world and we don't really recognize it. But it's also kind of great because we're always pushing ourselves to go forward and get the next great thing. Now, if you're looking at something specific like the space program, and more specifically like manned exploration of our solar system, then yeah, you can make claims about progress that we've made or progress that we haven't made. But if you're looking at technology across the board, then I don't really know how Neil would make any claims about us not moving forward technologically. I
Yeah,
imagine that his argument was more detailed than that.
his argument is very sophisticated, and there's actually a couple of videos online that you might want to Google, which is where I found my sources. I mean, I saw a presentation of him talking about the lack of our lack of attempting any big projects similar to the lunar landings, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, I would disagree with that. I think that we entered, especially recently, we've gone into a new era of these big prizes, that spur researchers across the board to come up with novel attempts. I was very surprised, but I'm very gratified to see the Dragon capsule docking with the space station, and
Yeah.
to see that maybe the privatization of commercial space travel is going to be a good thing, because I was pretty bummed with Obama when it came to the way he was approaching the space program or not approaching it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you look at something like the X Prize, you look at the DARPA Grand Challenge with the autonomous vehicles. I mean, they're passing legislation in Nevada to figure out exactly what you need in order to put an autonomous vehicle on the streets. This is going to transform our lives, the infrastructure of our cities. Major aspects of our lives are going to change when we have autonomous vehicles. And this is the kind of sweeping technological advancement that comes from those sorts of bold sometimes government-funded challenges to the general public. And there's
Hmm.
lots of those right now. There are those that apply to space elevators. There are prize money that apply to material science and nanotechnology. And I think that all across the board, people have positive visions of scientific success that they're endeavoring to reach. And And that's something that Neil. So I spoke to Neil recently at a dinner in the Northwest, and that's something that he is worried about. Is that too much of science fiction is becoming dystopian, and
Hmm.
we're not giving scientists positive visions to work toward. And I totally see his point. On one hand, I think we might be well. He's Neil Stephenson, but for me, it feels like it might be overestimating my kind of impact on scientists. I don't feel like scientists are scouring through everything I write and going, "Damn it, I just don't know what to build."
Yeah, but then on
Daniel
the other hand, you're much younger than
told
he is, so there's still way to go.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
yeah, I would love to reach a point where he's at, someday if I keep working. But to some extent, scientists are fine. They draw inspiration from science fiction, but we're not driving that in any sort of concrete way. So, it's true though. There absolutely should be positive visions for scientists to strive toward.
So let's move on to another book then, to Robopocalypse, which we briefly mentioned. Um, Perhaps for those of us, of our viewers who are not familiar with the book, I should say that the book, in a way, is about a post-singularity world war, where this godlike artificial intelligence called Arcos comes to exist and basically declares war on humanity. But there's no nuclear missiles, there's no total annihilation. In fact, Arcos is, and that's what's very unique about your book, is that Arcos is not too preoccupied with humanity itself. So, would
Yeah.
you like to elaborate a little bit? Why would that be the case? And why not the Terminator, where the sole purpose of the robots is to kill everyone that's human?
Yeah. It's absolutely key. I mean, you nailed it. That's exactly what I was going for in Robopocalypse because over and over and over, I've seen in fiction circumstances where human beings are fighting robots, and the robots are either trying to wipe out every last human being or they're trying to become human. And in either case, it's pathetic for the robots. Why would the robots be so focused on human beings? And the answer is because it's human beings writing the stories. We're narcissistic. We really think that we're really important. And so we write these stories. And, but if you really think about it, and of course, I love robots. I mean, I really respect what robots can become, and if you reach a point where you have an AI that's at human levels of intelligence or more, it's its own thing. It's like meeting an alien. And so I don't see any reason that it would be overly concerned with human beings. And I respect robots too much to write a story in which they are fawning after human beings, either trying to kill us or trying to become us. And I just don't think that's interesting. On a higher level theme, I think that the Robot Uprising theme is all about human beings being afraid of depending on their technology. And so we write stories and we mythologize this fear that we have of our own technology dependence. And we write stories where that fear is embodied as a killer robot, and we fight the robots and win. But it's bullshit because we can't win against technology. We are technology. We can't survive without technology. We exist for one purpose, and that is to create tools that continue to keep us alive. So there is no circumstance in which we can go against technology and destroy it and then walk away. And so in Apocalypse, the story quickly gets more complicated. It reaches a point where we're having to work together with our technology, with these sophisticated thinking machines and tools, in order to move forward and to survive.
So if you accept my term in calling your book Robopocalypse a sort of a post-singularity or sort of a singularitarian book, how is it that, the singularity by definition is something we cannot see beyond? How hard it is to write about a post-singularity war or world anyway?
Well, I'm not writing about the idea of human beings joining in the singularity. So I'm not talking about people uploading their brains into machines and joining a vast consciousness that's rotating in a Dyson sphere around some star, because who cares? I love reading about that stuff. I love those stories, but it's really not what I want to write about because it's not relatable, And stories are about drama and characters and the relationships between the characters. And the instant that you invoke a post-singularity world and you destroy the conventional understanding of relationships, where you say, oh, well, there's 1,000 daughters. You have 1,000 daughters now because she's uploaded her mind into 1,000 different machines. Well, it destroys something valuable. It destroys something fundamental about telling a story, which is that a father loves his daughter. A father will do anything to save his daughter. And it's fun to play with, but in some sense, on some level, it's a gimmick. Because your reader, until we really hit the singularity, is not going to really be able to conceptualize that. And so you're not going to really be able to tell a story in a conventional way that has a heart in sort of a traditional, the way a Shakespearean story would have a heart, because you care about fathers and sons and wives and husbands and things like that. So, true, Robopocalypse starts with a singularity, but the characters don't partake. The characters are still living in the same world. And in fact, Arcos is largely inscrutable and it's really hard to determine whether he's good or bad or agnostic or what. And so as you go through this book, it's really about human beings and what they'll do to survive in a world that they can't understand because this singularity has happened.
So let me ask you this then. How about, I want to take a couple of your themes here, but one of them is the way you tell the story, because you have a very sort of dirty, clean, on one hand very simple, on the other hand very dirty, sort of down to the bone, very gritty style of telling the story. It's very visual in a way. It's almost like painting pictures. So what kind of tips would you have for our viewers who might be aspiring writers, for example?
Sure. I mean, it's so funny to be asked this, because it's like, it's just great. I mean, I love it. I guess at some point I made a transition where people are asking me how to write, and that cracks me up. But one thing that I've noticed in my writing is you're right. I'm really visual with it. So I picture it in my mind and I describe what I'm seeing, and I think that just grows up. That comes from me growing up playing with GI Joes and having them enact little scenes in battles and stuff, and then just describing it. But one thing I found is that sometimes you get to writing and you realize that you don't really have it securely in your head. You're just sort of writing to describe, you start writing a little more loose and it gets a little fuzzier because you can't picture exactly what it looks like, because you don't have those details. And when that happens, you need to stop and go do some research so that you find some images, read some other people's descriptions of going through whatever it is you're talking about, because it's not a one-to-one mapping, but the reader can tell whenever you're not able to visualize what you're writing. And so, I can tell when I go back and read what I've just written and I go, well, I don't know where the person is standing. I can't tell you exactly what this place looks like, and you don't have to describe everything. That's another hard part, is figuring out the minimal amount you need to describe in order to sort of conjure up wherever and whatever is happening. But, my advice is write about something that you can visualize very clearly. And if you can't, then go do some more research.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, speaking about visualizing then, how much can you tell us about the movie?
Not much. I mean, I can tell you that Steven Spielberg is directing it, and it was written by Drew Goddard, who just wrote The Cabin in the Woods and wrote a lot of really terrific Lost episodes and Buffy episodes. And I can tell you that both of those guys are true robot nerds, and that they really love robots. And I vetted them. The guy that went to school for robotics, I vetted those guys, and they're legit. So the film is supposed to shoot later this summer, according to articles that I've read, and it looks like it's on track. I think that I hope that there will be some casting information very soon, but there's nothing public yet. And the actual release date was pushed back to 2014, and I had mixed feelings about it because I'm so excited about seeing this movie, which was originally slated to come out July 4th, 2013.
Yeah.
But I think what happened was Avengers came out on I think April 25th, and it did so well in that slot that they went ahead and pushed Robopocalypse to come out on the same date as the Avengers did this year
Wow.
in 2014. And so, on one hand, it's kind of a relief because since they're going to be shooting it to tail into this year, they're going to
Hmm.
have a whole year to ramp up all the marketing and to go to Comic-Con and to go to all these places and show footage, up front and really do a lot of work on the post effects and the CGI and
Yeah.
everything. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, honestly, a lot of this movie is going to be about the post, and that's where I'm really going to try to jump in and potentially have some input. But, there's no guarantees, and I really had my creative input by writing the book, and so I have no expectation there. But of course, I'll be first in line when it does come out.
Oh, I'll be in that line too. But let me ask you, what's the most exciting thing, or what's the best thing ever that happened to you with respect to the movie? The thing that like really blew your mind.
Well, I mean, the going and meeting the filmmakers was incredible, right? I mean, that's just really special to just be in a room with those sorts of intellects and just being able to just talk robots and kind of get swept up in it. But the coolest thing probably was at last year's San Diego Comic-Con, getting to meet Spielberg and Peter Jackson right before they did their Tintin panel, and then we had this moment where we kind of walked through. It was me and them and lots of other people and got security guards, these sorts of guys. And we kind of walked right through the middle of Comic-Con. We went down this big escalator, and then on the other side, you have all these people coming up the escalator, and just watching all those double takes as people realized it was like this 1-2 punch of Spielberg and Peter Jackson, uh, you know, like demigods of Comic-Con. That was really special and just like amazing to watch, to see, and then also to see the people that were looking at their cell phones and missed it, who were literally 2 feet away from these guys and didn't look up from their cell phones and missed out and had no idea who they just went past. I mean, that was pretty.
So do you feel the pressure though, in the sense that, I mean, you are perhaps from the youngest generation of science fiction writers at the moment, at least to my awareness, and then you have people like, you know, Werner Vinge, Robert J. Sawyer, Charlie Stross, Cory Doctorow, Carl Schroeder, um, Neil Stevenson, and yet your movie, your book, got picked up to be a Steven Spielberg DreamWorks movie. So do you feel like, oh my God, the next book I write has to be like really amazing, or I'm now?
No, so in fact, Spielberg, DreamWorks bought Robopocalypse after I had written 100 pages. So I had to actually write the rest of that book after having interacted with them and knowing that they were waiting, and they were in fact urging me to hurry up. They really wanted the next pages so that they could get started writing the script, and actually they started writing the script right away and doing CG and stuff based on just the 100 pages. And so, oddly enough, it never occurred to me that I was under pressure. And I don't know if it's just some sort of particular brand of stupidity that I suffer from, but I find it very difficult to, in the morning, when I'm sitting there with coffee, writing my book in my favorite coffee shop by myself, no pressure, nobody watching, nobody. I find it very hard to conceptualize this notion that people are, waiting on these words, or that a lot of people are going to read these things. That's just so abstracted from the actual act of sitting down and writing every day. And the fact is, I don't write beautiful words of wisdom every morning. I mean, sometimes I write crap all day, and I go back and whenever I edit, I just go, oh, geez, this is all gone. This is just crap. And other times I go through and go, wow, I thought I wrote really just crap that day, but there's a couple of really great things in here that I can build on. So, no, I didn't feel pressure on that. I didn't feel pressure on Amped. And now I'm writing Robogenesis, which is the sequel to Robopocalypse. I just sold that last week, and I don't really feel pressure either. I just feel excited. You know, they're going to make their own movie, and they're going to take their favorite parts, and so there's no pressure on me to word for word write something that Spielberg is going to turn into a movie. I just have to focus on writing my books and doing what I love and writing something that I'm going to love, and then they'll do their thing.
Well, I was planning to ask you on that a little bit later, but because you brought it, could you share a little bit more about the Robogenesis before we move on to Amped?
Sure. Well, my website is danielhwilson.com, and it has my email address. So anybody listening, anybody watching that has demands about the sequel, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. So yeah, feel free to contact me. So in order to sell that book, I wrote a few chapters, and I wrote a really detailed description of what I want to do with it and which characters I want to bring back and where I want to go. And so a lot of it was picking and choosing who I really love
Who you want to kill and who you want to spare.
I want to follow. Yeah. And so, you have people like Matilda and her brother Nolan and 902, and I could never, ever let go of them. Takeo, I could never let go of Takeo Nomura and Makiko. They're just really dear to me,
They're dear to me too. Yeah, they're very moving.
Thank you. There are other characters that I could potentially let go of, and I'm really planning on exploring Arcos a lot more, and the notion of this singularity and whether and what it means for him to his embodiment. He had a pretty easy embodiment in the first one. He was embodied as a little boy. It was very creepy, but he had a main location where he was. He was buried under the ice, and it was pretty simple to focus on. And I think it's going to get more complex in the next book, and we're going to see different incarnations of Arcos, and his grand scheme, I think, is going to become clearer.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I hope to write a third book.
So it's a trilogy. Fantastic.
Well, ideally, I'm not committed to a trilogy yet, and that'll all depend on whether people want to read it, and that's as it should be.
Yeah, and then therefore that also means that if the movie is successful, as it most likely will be, there would be the second book turning into the second part of the movie, etc., etc. That's fantastic.
Well, I haven't read the script, so I actually don't know what happens in the movie. I know from inferring. I know which locations they're shooting at and things like that. So based on that, I know which characters are going to be there because the characters are all over the world. There's Afghanistan. I'm not saying where they're shooting, but in the book, there's Afghanistan, Japan, London. Obviously the United
Oklahoma.
States. Different place. Yeah, Oklahoma, where I grew up. Alaska. So a lot of those are going to be in the movie, and so I know kind of which characters, but I don't know really what happens. And I know they had to simplify it a lot. So
yeah,
what's good is that I sold this second book without ever reading the script for the first movie. So the second book is very true to the first book. I am going to read the script before I finish writing the second book, so I will be able to, if I want, take that into consideration. But it's good that I have a control variable, at the beginning.
So let me see if I can bring your newest book in the following way. In a way, all of your books are a discussion or a conversation about the relationship between humanity and technology, right? I mean, in Robot Uprising or Robopocalypse, it's external to us. And as technology is getting miniaturized and getting smaller and smaller all the time, it is going to become literally part of us. It already has become literally part of some of us, at least.
Sure.
So your next book is called Amped. What would you like to tell us about it? The book only came a couple of days ago, otherwise I would have read it. And I'm planning to read it next week, actually.
So Amped is it's about what happens when our technology migrates into our bodies. And I feel like we've been co-evolving with our technology for hundreds of thousands of years. We are really, as human beings, shaped by our technology fundamentally. I mean, on an evolutionary level, and we're reaching this amazing milestone where we're becoming technologically proficient enough to put it inside of our own bodies. And so, to me, this feels like a real milestone, and it's going to have a lot of real social consequences. And so that's the area where this story takes place, is the 10 years into the future, 20 years into the future, when this is starting to happen and society is reacting to it. And so it tells the story of a guy named Owen Gray, who's a school teacher who happens to have a neural implant, and it's called an amp. And people that have these amps are sometimes called amps themselves in kind of a derogatory way. And what happens is the government, people start realizing that these implants are making people with disabilities smarter than able-bodied people. Mm-hmm. And they start to realize that the writing on the wall says pretty soon we're all going to have to get an implant if we want to compete in a new society. And this is something that is common to technology. If you want to compete in modern society, you have to have a car. You have to probably have a smartphone at some point if you want to really engage people on every level that they engage each other on. So this is no different, but it means you have to put it under your skin, and that's a big deal for people. And so the government passes a law that says that people that have amps are not a protected class, and it basically opens the door for legalized discrimination as kind of an unintended consequence. And so we follow the story of Owen Gray as he is displaced from society, from his place in society, and violence erupts on both sides, and the nation kind of spirals down toward a civil war, and Owen has to do everything in his power to kind of try to prevent that and to save the lives of the people he cares about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's fascinating. I did read the first couple of chapters of the book already, and they're very gritty, very, very gritty, very moving. But what I want to ask you is about your term. The word that you chose is amped. Why not transhuman or post-human or cyborg or something like that?
I did not want to invoke all of that. I did not. Those are words that every word is really just a signpost to a lot of shared context that we all have, and to say the word transhumanism or post-human or anything like that, it just brings in a whole lot of very distracting context that I didn't want to have as part of my book. Mm-hmm. This book is about people. It's about a kid going to school and having other kids pick on them because they've got an amp, and trying to deal with that. It's not about some kind of super-powered future where people are, it's not Deus Ex Men, as came out in a previous interview. There's no Deus Ex component. There's no X-Men component, really. I just wanted to keep it very grounded in reality so that you could really see this, so that you could really focus on it. And I love reading science fiction that throws everything into it, just big, like China Mieville, just sort of like big, crunchy worlds where just everything you can imagine it could be there is there. But for my own writing, I find that to get across my themes, and maybe I'm just not smart enough, but I like to show a world that is very recognizable and very similar to our own, but there's maybe one or two things that are different. And then as the reader, you can really intellectually examine this and look at it from different angles and go, yeah, that makes sense. No, that doesn't make sense. Oh, that's a surprise that would happen. But thinking about it, it's obvious. So, for instance, in this world, the people that have implants have a little sort of maintenance port that's on their temple, so other people can discriminate against them when they see these things. So regular people start changing their hairstyles so that you can see that they have a smooth temple, and you can tell that they're pure human. And it's little things like that, little social, cultural things, sort of pervade society, and that's the kind of really fun thinking that I like to put into my works.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this then. In a way, your story, if I get it right, asks the question, and I want to ask you if you can also give us the answer without surrendering the ending. But the question is, does technology make us more powerful or more vulnerable?
Yeah, well, both, right? I mean, this is what I love as a storyteller. You know, as a guy. I mean, because ultimately, I'm writing a story that's supposed to entertain you and make you think, right? And
Hmm.
this is just the wonderful thing about writing about technology is that every day the stakes go up because we our technology becomes more powerful and we become more vulnerable and more powerful. And what it really boils down to is whether we're good or evil. Are we gonna be good and go to the stars and transcend, are we gonna leap out into the future and do wonderful things and explore the universe and get off the planet, or are we evil? Can we not be trusted with this technology? Are we going to destroy ourselves? Are
Hmm.
we going to do terrible things to each other? And the answer is that we're going to do both because we are good and evil. But ultimately, you know, which way do the scales hang? Is it 51-49 good, 51-49 evil? And this is a very basic, fundamental type of drama. You think about Adam and Eve walking out of the garden of, tasting the tree of knowledge and being thrown out of the garden. And, it's like we're on our own out here. We have the knowledge that we have and we're going to use it. And we have to trust ourselves to be good. And ultimately, I do have faith in humankind. I think that we're mostly good.
Hmm.
And I think that we can be trusted to use our technology to transcend and that comes through, in the book ultimately.
Hmm. So let me see if I can take this to the very personal level of Daniel H. Wilson then. Imagine a world where I am amped, all of around us are amped, and we're all writers, and you're competing against us, right? Because you said when you compete, etc., etc. Would you amp yourself? Because clearly, just like that girl who went to school and suddenly returned and was the best high school student of all the city or something like that,
Right.
suddenly from Daniel H. Wilson, fantastic writer, you would barely be able to compete with the rest of us. So would you amp yourself? And if yes, under what
Yeah,
circumstances? Is that good enough for you?
you know, I, uh, I would absolutely utilize new technology to stay abreast of the rest of society. I do that now. I drive a car. I have a smartphone. I'm talking to you on Skype. I did not know what Skype was, 5 years ago. Now I have figured it out and used it because I have to, because you did, because a million other people did. And, that's the way technology pulls us all forward, sometimes kicking and screaming. And, if it reaches a point where a neural implant is what I need in order to be a part of society, then that's what I'll do. And there is a mental hurdle there because you're talking about technology going into your body, but I really do think it's just a mental thing. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It's no different than the progress that technology has always taken.
And in that case, then how late in the game would you wait
Yeah.
before you make that leap is the other question. Because I painted a picture in which you're kind of really, really towards the end. But what's the time of leap that you would choose for yourself?
Well, I think that this is all about how old you are. I really do believe that. I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal last year, in 2011, about this, about how people form models of how technology works and how we get uncomfortable when
Hmm.
new models show up and new technology arrives. And the younger you are, the easier it is to
Yeah.
incorporate this new technology into your life. And so, as you get older, I think it really becomes more of a struggle to force yourself. And if you don't force yourself, which is a totally reasonable option, you sacrifice membership in society on some level. If you're not on Facebook, if you refuse to buy a computer or an automobile or a bill, you know, you're making a sacrifice. And so, I will be probably second in line. I'm not going to be getting first gen implant technology as soon as it becomes elective. If I had a serious disability, I would be all over it. Of course, as most people would. We want to use assistive technology, uh, But in the meantime, I'll hold out. I someday it's going to be very, you still hear about authors now who write out their books longhand, right? And I can easily imagine 30 years from now telling people, "Oh, I still write my novels on my laptop." And of course, they've all got implants and they think their novels, directly into the internet or whatever, and they'll be like, "Wow, that's interesting, old man." But that's okay. That's the way it goes. It's natural. We all get to occupy our own spot on that conveyor belt, depending on our age.
Fantastic. Daniel, we're approaching the end of our interview, so I just want to take a minute here to invite our viewers. Guys, if you enjoy the show, please help me spread the word for it. And as I said, you can do that in one of two ways. You can simply go to iTunes and write a very brief review of the show, or you can go and make a donation on our donations page on singularityweblog.com. Now, going back to Daniel. Daniel, you've already mentioned it, but perhaps you should repeat it. Is your blog the best place that people can follow you and learn more about you and your books?
Sure. So DanielHWilson.com is a great place to just find everything else that I've got. So, if you want to go check out Wikipedia or IMDb entries, or if you want to come see me on Facebook or Twitter, then Daniel H. Spot. And I have lots of little short stories and things that come out as well, that things that don't make such a big splash. And so, if you want to keep up with everything. So, for instance, the first chapter of Robogenesis is going to be coming out in an anthology pretty soon. And so if you want to be up to date on that, and I love it. I love this first chapter. It's in the anthology, so wrap it around that. It's really fun.
That's fantastic. Okay, we have a little bit of a downward spike on the broadband here, but I think it's improving. So the very last question that I always ask of my guests here on the show, Daniel, is this: do you have a single message or the most important thing that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from this half an hour that they spent with you today?
If I had a message, it goes right back to you calling me out for joining the dark side and writing dystopian science fiction after having been in the robotics industry and everything. I just want to tell people that I think technology is great, but I also think that, with great power comes great responsibilities. So it's fun and worthwhile to read science fiction and to really think hard about how technology is going to affect our lives in the future.
That's fantastic. Daniel H. Wilson, thank you very much for taking time to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
Singularity.